One of my favorite things to do when I go to the beach is build a sandcastle. This project is a combination of drawing and collage. To create the water on my picture, I use some chalk pastels. If you don't have chalk pastels at home, you could use sidewalk chalk or chalk for a chalkboard. Or you could even use some crayons or some colored pencils to color your water. To get started, I'm going to place a piece of white paper on my drafting table. I'm using some pastel paper. If you don't have pastel paper, you could use a regular piece of white drawing paper. The advantage of pastel paper is it has what's called a tooth, tiny little indentations that help hold the chalk pastel in place. Next, I'm going to take a piece of construction paper that's the same width as my drawing paper. I'm going to tear that construction paper in an interesting zigzag pattern all the way across the paper. And both halves of that paper are going to be used for my ocean waves. I'm going to start with one near the top of the paper. I'm going to choose one of the 3 shades of color that I've pulled from my pastel box. And I'm going to use that color from the torn edge of the paper all the way to the top edge of my drawing paper to make it look like the ocean continues far away. I'm going to pick that piece up, put my other paper down, choose a different shade of blue, and shade across from my torn edge up towards my first color. I'm leaving a little bit of empty space so that it looks like the white caps on the top of the ocean. I'm going to switch back to my other piece of paper, and I have 3 shades, so I'm going to take my 3rd color and I'm going to use that from my torn edge up towards my 2nd color. Again, leaving a little bit of space to look like the white caps on the top of the ocean's water. And I'll keep alternating back and forth. You can either do your colors in the same order and make a pattern, or you can do them in a completely different order. That's up to you. And you'll keep doing that all the way down until you're almost to the bottom of the paper. I have one that I've already finished, so I'm going to pull that one up to continue. On this paper, I took my finger and I rubbed each of my colors gently to soften the color. I used the same finger for each of my different shades of blue. By softening the edges of my color a little bit, it should help keep my pastel from smearing if someone were to touch it or rub up against it. Something else you could do to make sure that your pastel stays in place is to have mom or dad spray it with a clear fixative. If you don't have that, you could also use some hairspray, but again, let mom or dad do that part. When you're done, wash your hands or wipe them with a damp cloth so that your fingers will not be full of your pastel colors when you do your collage. I'm going to take a piece of paper that is the same width as my white pastel paper, and I'm going to tear that like I did my brown paper to make an irregular edge. I'm going to look at both of them and see which one I like better and which way I like to place them. If you're not happy with either of them, you can certainly take your paper and tear a little bit more off of one of them until you're happy with one. I think I like this one. I'm going to leave a little bit of the white here so it looks like the froth of water when the water comes into the edge of the sand. I'm going to put a few drops of glue, one on each corner, a couple in between them, and a couple down the middle. Little dab will do you. I'm going to turn that over and place that down on my paper. Your extra half of your paper you can use to make the shapes for your sandcastle. So you can take your scissors and you can cut some basic geometric shapes, some squares, some rectangles, some triangles, trapezoids, whatever shapes you think you'd like to make. Or you could make shapes that are a little bit curvier. Maybe a semicircle, or you could even use some organic wiggly shapes. I have some shapes off to the side that I've already cut as well, so I'm going to pull some of those over. If you would like to make an opening in part of your sandcastle, you can fold the paper in half that you'd like to make the opening in and either draw that opening or cut it freehand. I'm going to glue that where I want it in my picture. And when you build your sandcastle can either have the same shapes on each side and be symmetrical, or you can build your sandcastle with different shapes on each side and make it asymmetrical. One of the things that castles have, or turrets, you can make a castle line across a rectangular piece of paper, cut along your lines, and cut across to take out the empty piece. Once you think you have your sandcastle built, you can decide what else you'd like to have in your picture. Maybe you want to have a boat far away in the ocean. Or maybe you want to add a pail and a shovel. Or you could have a combination of things and maybe even include some people swimming in your ocean. If you want your castle to have flags on the top, you can take a marker and draw a line for wherever you'd like to have your flags. And you can take a piece of construction paper and fold it. I folded it twice so that I could cut a triangular shape and have 3 flags. And I'm going to glue them all facing the same way so it looks like the wind is blowing the flags in the same direction. And if you want something like a boat in the background, you could use a semicircle in some triangles for sails. You can leave a little bit of space in between your sails so that you can go back with your marker and draw a line for the mast of the boat. And maybe I'll glue a couple of people in my ocean. You can add whatever you'd like. Now, when you're done, you're going to decide if you think your shapes show up well enough or if you think you might want to shade them a little bit. If you take a regular pencil and you shade on the bottom of your shapes to show where they're hitting the sand and where they're hitting each other, that will help to define your shapes a little bit. You also might want to shade the side that is furthest away from the sun. So think about whether your sun is shining from the left or from the right. If I want my sun to be shining from the left, it would cast a shadow towards the right. So the right side of my shapes would have a little bit of a shadow. And by adding a little bit of pencil line along those edges, I've helped to define my shapes, and I've added a little bit of dimension to my sandcastle. And that's all there is to it. I can't wait to see your designs.